Hello, this is CapCan Knows, the official podcast of the Capital Area College Access Network. You may be familiar with our newsletter articles of the same name. We are excited to engage the community in conversations about college access. I am your host, Jacob Tkachuk, an AmeriCorps Vista serving with CapCan. Today is a very special episode because joining me today is once again Jeff Dole, CapCan's college and career coach. And our special guest today is Island Ellerby, an advisor in the financial aid office at Lansing Community College. So Jeff, for this episode, I will turn the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. So let's get started. First of all, Island, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So you were previously a college advisor working with students in high school, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And now you work at Lansing Community College as a financial advisor. So you've probably seen it all, and we're so grateful to have you here to share some of your wisdom and experience with our listeners. Can you tell us, just as a little background, a little bit about your college journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the first time anyone's called me super wise, but thank you. So I graduated high school back in 2011, and I went to Michigan State. It wasn't necessarily my first choice, and it was the only school I did not actually tour. I toured all the other schools I applied for and got accepted to, and didn't like the feeling on any of them, so I thought I'll just go to MSU, not see anything about it. And I think that was a big mistake for me, and that was something I shared a lot with my students, right? So everybody should go and, I say test the couch, sit on the couch, go to campus, and just see if you can see yourself there. Be a little bit more open than maybe I was. So I graduated from MSU 4 years later with a degree in economics and psychology. And I had learned about the College Advising Corps my junior year, and I really thought that would be my next step afterwards because I had such great help in high school. I wanted to kind of give back in that way. And now I work at LCC.
Awesome. So let's talk about students as they are, looking towards college, thinking about all that it takes to go to college. So suppose we have a student in that position where they're ready to go to college, but they really don't understand the financial aid options that are out there. So can you describe the various types of financial aid for students to consider?
Yeah. So there's typically, we break them into 4 different main types. Loans are considered a form of financial aid. A lot of students will sit down and say, I didn't get any financial aid. All I got was, like an unsubsidized loan. But that is a kind of financial aid per the Department of Education. So we've got loans, we've got grants, which is free money. Always great to have. Scholarships, that's usually merit-based or skill-based, also free money. And then not many people will talk about it, but work study is also considered financial aid. Not every on-campus job is considered a work study job, but it's basically the Department of Ed will subsidize some on-campus jobs, and that's a form of financial aid because theoretically you'll take that paycheck that you get from your on-campus job and pay off your tuition if you have a bill.
Okay, so there's at least 4 different types of financial aid for students to consider. Suppose a young adult graduated from high school previously and now wants to go to college. So what are some of the fundamental steps that they should take to begin the financial aid process?
Every student will want to start with the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That can be found on FAFSA.gov. You'll want to actually start by getting an FSA ID, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a username and password. So that way it's gone through the government and many different channels to confirm that you are a citizen here and that you maybe there's a vet or somebody, who gets different benefits, the Department of Homeland Security. It goes through all of that. So you only get one is what I'm saying. You can't just reapply for a new FSA ID. So once you have one, you want to be sure that you keep that information and then start filling out the FAFSA.
Yeah, I know FAFSA is just one of those acronyms that's out there that a lot of students don't really understand what it is. Can you say again, what is FAFSA and when and why should students complete it?
Yeah, so the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. Students should complete it. It opens every October. It's kind of confusing, but the year before you decide to go. So if you were to attend in the upcoming fall 2020, you would want to fill out the 2020 and 2021 FAFSA, and that opened back in October. Students should complete it because you might be surprised what you get in terms of grants and loans. Sometimes scholarships, like the LCC Foundation, will often determine an award based on what's called need, and that's all shown through the FAFSA because you answer questions based on your financial situation.
Okay, so here we are in mid-January, and students listening to this might be thinking, uh-oh, it's past due. I should have done this back in October. Is it too late now to fill out the FAFSA? I mean, can a student fill it out now and have it ready for next fall?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're going next fall, the good news is you have quite a lot of time to fill it out. So students that maybe are enrolling right now in January, they can fill out the 2019 and 2020 FAFSA. That FAFSA actually doesn't expire. You can't fill it out again after June 30th. So they have a lot of time to fill out that application.
And having helped students with this, I know sometimes it can be confusing. There's a lot there that may be difficult for students to fill out. So a couple of related questions to completing the FAFSA. Do students need their parents' tax information to complete their FAFSA? And if they have that, can they turn to someone like LCC to get support in filling out the FAFSA?
Oh, absolutely. It'll depend on each school, but I know LCC specifically, we have the STAR Zone available for students that are maybe intimidated by the process or not quite sure where to go. And you can come down, no appointment needed, and fill out the FAFSA. Have somebody there to help you through it. You do need your FAFSAs, your parents' FAFSA information, and you also don't. It kind of depends on your particular situation. So for most students that are considered dependent, they'll need their parents there and their parents' tax information. However, if you're in a situation where you don't have contact with your parents for some reason, or you moved out of for your own safety, things of that nature, you would just need to contact your school directly and make sure that you're filling out a special circumstance request, is what we call it at LCC. So that way you don't have to have your parents' information on there. Okay. So there are options if you don't have access to your parents, if you want to complete the FAFSA and get financial aid.
So when you say school, for clarification, you're not talking about their high school, you're talking about the college that they plan to attend.
Yes.
Okay.
Get in contact with them, get comfortable talking to them because they'll help you and make any resources available for you.
Okay. So I know students sometimes learn from others that have gone through this. So this next question, do you have a story maybe about a student who had difficulty with financial aid and how that was resolved and maybe some lessons learned from that for others?
Yeah, so relatively recently I had met with a student at LCC who she came in with a rejected FAFSA. And usually what that indicates to me when I look at a file before I meet with a student is there might be a special circumstance that is required. So I sat down with her for 30 minutes and we kind of went into it. It's a little hard for students to confess to a stranger in a position of power that they need help and kind of some of the more painful aspects of their life. But in this situation, she had no contact with her father, never had, and her mom was out of the picture because of some drug addiction issues, and she was living with grandma and trying to make things on her own. So because I had that information though, I was really happy to tell her that there's a process for that. There's a way for you to get financial aid and to go to school. And you can certainly do that here at LCC. We have a process called the Special Circumstance Request. I mentioned that earlier. It's a fairly simple process, but it can be heavily involved and take some processing time. So I walked her through how to submit the form, and then a committee reviews it. They request any other documentation, court documents, if she has any access, statements from other professionals, and her own personal statement regarding the situation. And we were able to award her based on that. And she was given financial aid, she was given Pell Grant, and some LCC grants here and there to help her out. So that was a really positive experience.
Well, that's awesome. I can relate to that because I've helped students out as well, and it seems that it can be kind of tricky for students if they're not familiar with this type of form. And oftentimes there are some mistakes that students make that slows the process down a little, I think. Can you talk maybe about some of the common mistakes that you see students making when they're filling out the FAFSA?
Yeah, so One of the more general mistakes that we see is the student-only signs when they're supposed to have parent information on there. And maybe they do have parent information on there, but only the applicant or the student will sign it, and both parents and the students need to be on there. We also have students who get confused when they ask about their parents' marriage. You know, their parents were maybe divorced a long time ago, but they're remarried now. How do you answer that? And the general answer is whoever you spend 51% of your time with, and who will be providing support throughout your college journey, that needs to be accounted for in the FAFSA. So if your parents are divorced and that person is remarried, that step-parent needs to be included on the FAFSA. That's a pretty common mistake that we will see.
Right. So I would say, again, for students listening to this is where someone at your college can really help out. They can explain this in a way that can make it a lot easier and really can streamline things for you.
Yeah, and I'll just say we're there wanting to help, right? A lot of the people in my field have helping degrees like psychology or counseling and whatnot, so we're here. You just gotta have the courage to ask.
Excellent. So suppose a student does ask. Suppose they call you and say, I need some help with my FAFSA, and they set up an appointment to come meet with you. What are some of the documents that you should expect that student to bring with them or that is expected from FAFSA?
Okay, yeah. So generally speaking, there's a new tool called the IRS data retrieval tool. So everybody used to have to bring in a whole bunch of tax information. Now you don't necessarily have to. If you filed taxes, we could potentially link up to the data retrieval tool and it'll populate for you. Outside of that though, you will need to bring your W-2s and any proof of earned income. So maybe you didn't file taxes, but you did make $3,000 mowing people's lawns or something. We would need proof of that in the W-2s so we could fill out the FAFSA. And then your social security number is a big one, especially for young people. They don't necessarily know it all the time, so you should have that ready and available. And we can create the FSA ID together, but it'd be really great if you just had that ready so we can jump right in.
Okay, so here I am, a student ready to go to college, and I go to you for help. We get the FAFSA completed. As a freshman, everything looks good and school's paid for. Am I done filling out the FAFSA for my 4 years?
No. If you want to continue to receive financial aid, that's something that needs to be filled out every year. So I would encourage you to come back if you still need help. We can certainly sit down and do that every year.
So every year, a good thing to think about is sometime in October?
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So you said everyone. Does everyone going to college need to fill out the FAFSA?
That's a great question. I always say it doesn't hurt to have the FAFSA on file. Even if maybe you don't get something like the Pell Grant, a lot of schools will use the FAFSA information to determine other financial aid that might be available for you, especially in the terms of institutional scholarships.
So I know, having worked with lots of students preparing to go to college, that everyone's really looking for a break financially, and it'd be nice if they had loans or even better grants that could pay for some of their college costs. Suppose you have a student that completes the FAFSA and didn't receive any grants or loans. Does this mean that there's no financial aid options for college? And if not, what options do they have?
Yeah, so most often the case is you will be given a loan if you aren't given a grant. So that's determined based on your financial situation and your need based on your household income. The loans are there, and then let's say in some weird way you don't get any of those. There's also companies like Sallie Mae and PNC that you could get what's called an alternative loan. So it's not provided through the government, but it is through maybe your local credit union to help you get started at school.
Good. So again, loans you have to pay back.
Yes.
Usually with some interest, oftentimes after you complete your education, but not always. Grants are, in a sense, free money that you do not have to pay back, just to kind of generalize that.
Yes.
Okay. So suppose those two are exhausted and a student's now looking for scholarships. What suggestions do you have for students who are looking for scholarships in the community or elsewhere?
I would say no amount is too small of an amount. It especially adds up when you go to a place like LCC. $500 there could be books. It could be a big part of your tuition there, depending on how many classes you take. So start now, start early. Don't give up, Some of them might have essays that require, but a lot of them are asking the same question. How is getting this scholarship going to help you in your future? That's basically what all scholarships are trying to get to the point of. And then additionally, always turn back towards your communities where you came from. I had a friend in undergrad who, our junior year, she turned back to the community I'm from in Battle Creek. She went to our community foundation, applied for a scholarship, and because she was one of the only upperclassmen at undergraduate to apply, she got it. And it was like $3,000, and I felt like such an idiot for not doing it myself.
Well, it's good advice, though. I mean, to have students think about it in that way. So what advice do you have about the financial aid process, especially things that you wish you had known as a student?
Ask questions, for sure. I was kind of one of those students who, as soon as my financial aid package came, I blindly clicked accept all, and so I got a lot of loans that maybe I didn't necessarily need. I got a lot of excess financial aid that now I have to pay back. I wish I had looked, asked questions, figured out what do I actually need, right? And that's something in our community we call borrowing responsibly. So I strongly encourage students to look at your tuition bill, look at your financial aid, ask questions if things are going to be adjusting, depending on how many classes you're taking. And you don't have to make payments, especially on interest in your, while you're going to school. I wish that I had, because it would have been like $25 a month that I could have left college with a lot less interest than I needed.
Right. That's a lot of very good advice. When I work with students, I oftentimes think that what I'm sharing is a little too much, a little bit of overload. So what I like to do is sometimes break things down into simple lists. So I'd like to have you consider that. Can you, for example, give us 3 things any student wanting to attend college next year can do today to begin looking for financial aid? I mean, what would be 3 things that they could do today?
You could get started on your FSA ID. Call any school that you're interested in and see if they have a scholarship application open for next year, or maybe if there's any particular steps that they want for you to take immediately. But it's always going to be the FAFSA, the FSA ID, and contact that school.
Thirdly, contact that school.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So let's keep moving forward with this. I want to make sure that we have as much information in this podcast for students who need help as possible. Where should students go? I think you kind of touched on this a little earlier, but if you want to add to it, that would be wonderful. Where should students go for help when they're completing their FAFSA and with financial aid questions? Where would they go to, or who would they call?
Definitely, if you're having technical issues, contact the FAFSA directly. Sometimes their website glitches out, or if you're not sure how to answer a question, definitely call your school. Now, I've worked at 2 institutions, and both of those institutions, if a student walks in and says that they need help filling out their FAFSA, we will absolutely do that right then, as soon as they walk in the door. So I worked at DU and I worked at LCC, and they both offer FAFSA clarification and financial aid help. We'll log in with you and walk you through it.
Wonderful. So this is kind of the wisdom question. What other suggestions do you have for students seeking financial aid? Is there any tidbits of information that you can say, you really should consider this?
You really should consider starting early, right? So for LCC specifically, our scholarships application is open right now through the end of January, and that's going to be for next fall. So you want to just be mindful of how early can you get this started, so that way you're all set and on track to have everything in place and paid for when you're going to school, so you can focus on going to school.
Wonderful. And I would add to that, if students need help, they can always contact their college and career coach. You can contact CAPCAN, or if you call LCC, they'll put you in touch with somebody at the financial aid department.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it seems like our time is running out. And Island, I have one last question for you. So we end every interview with CAPCAN Knows, named after the name of our podcast, where you would state your name and what you know. So I ask you, Miss Ellerby, who are you and what do you know?
My name is Island Ellerby, and I know help is out there.
That is a fantastic answer, and thank you so much again. Jeff, thank you for being the host today.
You are most welcome.
And Island, once again, thank you so much for coming on over across the street.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So for more information on CapCan, please be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our links will be in the video description below, or visit us at our website at capcan.org. In the description below, there'll also be information on the LCC Financial Aid Office and other useful tips. So make sure to check out the links below. Thank you all for listening to us today, and we will see you again very soon.